Welcome back, everyone. I'm Shashwati Dakuna. I'm a third-year PhD student in chemical engineering. I work on electrochemical CCUS, and I am very excited to be guiding you through the next section of today's event. So we have a conversation now between two cacti with Brian Korgel, the director of the Energy Institute. He's on my committee, so you're not going to believe anything I say about how awesome he is, so it's good that you've already met him. And Brian is going to be having a conversation with two people who have been really important to the Energy Institute, Nick Clausi, the VP of Research at ExxonMobil, and Haibin, General Manager for Shell's Research Alliance. They have played such a huge role in connecting UT's research to what's going on in industry. So I'll hand it off to Brian to introduce them further.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction. So when I was thinking about Between Two Cacti this year, so this was our series we kicked off last year, which I thought was very successful and wanted to continue. And I was thinking, what would be some really interesting topics to talk about? And I think industry-university partnerships is at the front of everyone's mind. So especially in my role as director of the Energy Institute, I spend a lot of time fostering partnerships with external stakeholders. So industry, especially in the oil and gas industry, is very important for us, for the University of Texas at Austin. So in my time as Energy Institute director, I look for friends of mine that I can call on to help me do things and accomplish my goals. And Nick and Haibin, I consider two of those friends who've been very important for me, very important for UT, and I think have a lot of insight because not only are they champions for the University of Texas at Austin, but they manage external engagements all over the world in many different forms and have seen best practices. They've seen some things that don't work. So Nick Clausi actually got his PhD in chemical engineering from UT Austin in 1998, and so I don't think quite overlapped. I started in 1998 in chemical engineering as an assistant professor. Did we meet each other? Or
we might have.
I'm sure. I used to get, people thought I was an undergrad when I started. So we may have overlapped, and you're like, am I your TA? Or something? So anyway, Nick Clausi, Vice President of Research for ExxonMobil. We're very proud of him as an alum of chemical engineering to just have such an exceptional career and work up the ladder at ExxonMobil to such an important position. And Nick's team works with leading research and technology companies, national labs, universities, and others around the world involved in breakthrough energy and product research. And then Haibin, I was just asking Haibin if he has a degree from UT because I think Haibin is one of the biggest UT supporters that I can think of. So I was like, aren't you an alum honorary alum? So Haibin got his PhD in geophysics from Stanford in 2002. So I really appreciate that because looking at what Stanford has done in terms of their Energy Institute equivalent and what MIT has done also, those are kind of two benchmarks for us when we think about that. And so having someone also in that geophysics community is really important for us. And Haibin is general manager of the Shell Research Alliance and leads a global team in the US, Canada, Netherlands, UK, China, India, and Singapore, oversees Shell's technology collaboration with more than 100 universities and energy-related governmental bodies globally. So I'm really, really excited to talk to you guys. I used to share an office right next to a professor named Howard Rosé, who, okay, so you remember
I was
Howard.
a TA for
Yeah, Howard was emeritus when I joined the faculty, and I remember in the hall, I was asking him about our chemical and petroleum engineering building, our CPE building. I was like, how was this building designed? And Howard was like, oh, it's designed after the Shell research facility, a building. And so it made me think a lot. But You know, Shell and ExxonMobil have had decades of really close engagement with UT Austin, and continue to in many different ways. And I want to kick it over to you both. I mean, one of you can, whoever wants to jump in first. Why has University of Texas Austin been such an important partner for your companies over the decades?
Yeah, I can. You want to?
Well, since you mentioned CPE, maybe I thank you for that. Well, thank you for this opportunity as well. I think the reason we have such a long-lasting relationship for research, for many things. Well, first of all, to start with, some of you may know University of Texas is the #1 source of recruit for Shell, not just in the U.S. but globally for most of the years. Occasionally, there's another university nearby. That's #1, but most times it's this university. So that helps a lot. But then in terms of the relationship on university research and all that, I think about this a lot. With any relationship, it can only be long-lasting if we share common values and interests. And I think that's what happens with us. It is truly a strategic partnership. There's a very important distinction between transactional versus strategic. But in the transactional relationship, as some of the class economics will tell you, there's a buyer and there's a seller, and normally the seller knows a lot more information than the buyer. So, for example, if I buy a solar panel, I probably know not a lot compared to the seller. But in the relation between Shell and UT, it's very, very different. We are very strategic. We each bring something to the table. We work together. We find problems together, and we co-create solutions and finding those solutions together. So that makes it extremely powerful.
Yeah, and I'll try not to overlap because a lot of what Haibin said, I definitely agree with. I mean, we engage with the University of Texas, and we have for a long time, for really two main reasons. One is to access capabilities, right? And what's unique about the University of Texas is it's so large and it has such strong capabilities, not just in engineering and sciences, but you get into law school, government, public and government affairs. There's a tremendous amount of capability. And, in the research area, that's all about connecting dots. And as Haibin said, it's not a one-way street, it's two ways. We're here to get exposed to new ideas, and hopefully we're exposing the researchers here to new ideas from our side. So that's one reason. The other reason is access to talent. And
you guys hire a lot of our students too.
We hire a lot of your students. This morning I pulled up the data, and so we have just under 100 PhDs from UT Austin working, and if for undergrads it'd probably be a few times that. So obviously we recruit a lot of talent here. Our prior CEO was a UT alum. Our current CEO is not. He's the other big Texas school, and we joke about that. But yeah, no, it's really important. Access and talent pipeline, just like Haibin mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering, has much changed in those relationships? I mean, it's now been 25 years I've been at UT as a professor. I know there was a Shell Foundation gift, something that actually went towards my startup package at UT. So Shell has been part of that, I know. Has anything been changing with the relationships over time?
I think over the years, the engagements and the collaboration has become much more multidisciplinary. That would be like a sort of a long-term trend. And it's something that we've been focused on around how do you, and I know it's something that the Energy Center has been focused on too, around how do we, because it's one of the unique aspects of UT because it's so large and has so much capability of it. How do you leverage all of that capability and bring it to bear? Because a lot of the solutions that we're working on in the energy transition are not, there's a lot of technical challenges, but there are a lot of policy challenges and things like that. And so that's something that's changed. I think the Energy Center, obviously, especially the past few years, has succeeded in attracting more partners. I think that's a really positive change.
Yeah.
And then from our side, we've centralized more and more of our footprint in North America in Houston, so we're only 2.5 hour drive away. So I think that's actually facilitated the collaboration.
Yeah. do you think that that creates some challenges? I mean, I think, to me, it seems easier for a company to, say, interact with the Department of Chemical Engineering or the Department of Petroleum Engineering or the Bureau of Economic Geology. And if a company wants to come in and interact with several different groups, and sometimes with priorities changing, I mean, how do you see those challenges playing out? Or are they challenges? I mean...
Yeah, so maybe I add on that one. Well, first of all, there's a lot of things that hasn't changed. The strategic nature of the partnership has not changed. There are a lot of other things that have changed, and that brings to what you mentioned as some of the challenges. One is the content has shifted quite a bit. We used to work with UT, mostly around oil and gas exploration, how to increase recovery, all those, and now is a lot more broader. We work a lot together on how to electrify, for example, process industry, how do you generate hydrogen at a low cost to generate a hydrogen value chain. So the scope is much larger. And the other aspect that's creating some challenge as well is instead of only focusing on fundamental R&D, now we work on a lot of projects that's much larger, like what you are leading, like hydrogen scale, epic seeding, some of the professors here are leading. Those are much larger, require a lot more resources. And how do we get engaged in those larger projects? And also, how do we access all the startups that's coming out of the university? There's a lot more rich content and opportunities that we need to access to. It's both challenge, but also a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. How's the university responding to your, maybe some of the different priorities at the companies, the shift, these larger projects, innovation and startups? I mean, how do you think UT is responding, or any university really, to some of those changing dynamics?
I think for UT specifically, I mean, a lot of the consortium that have been started up, I think, are really aimed at the challenges of the energy transition and then going to scale, right? And so Project Astron methane detection, the High Velocity Hub, Epic Sea on electrification of heavy industry. I mean, all big programs geared at how do we take fundamental science and actually put it in steel on the ground and large scale activity. So I think UT's been very responsive in that and really been leading.
Yeah. Something we were talking a little bit about leading up to the panel is how the university engagements may influence companies' perspectives or how you do things. I guess, Haibin, you were mentioning how important those regional partnerships are in terms of markets and engaging actually in the region. I mean, could you say something about that?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that we learned through working with the university is just, you cannot simply copy a technology from one region and paste to another and then scale them up. It just does not exist. So I'm very fortunate to lead, our global university partnerships, and I've seen how they play out, in US or Singapore or India. It's very, very different opportunities and challenges. I'll give you one example. In Singapore, we work a lot with the National University of Singapore. So they have a very strong technology techno-economic scene. About 30 people, they study all kind of scenarios, the energy transition pathway of the country, and then they, for example, in the hydrogen area, they study what's the cost, what's the timeline for generating hydrogen locally versus import, all kind of pathways. And that leads to a conclusion that can be quite different from Texas or California or New York. So to us, those really bring a lot of value in how we think, what is needed to scale up technology, what's the timeline, and what kind of policy support each of those governments need to have to really move the needle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, especially for energy transition, it's playing out differently in each part of the world. It's playing out differently even if you contrast Texas and California, right?
Yeah.
And so if you look at like the what we're working on at UT relative to like at the Stanford Energy Center, overall the same mission, but definitely different approaches and
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the hydrogen hubs, for example, the approach California took to their hydrogen hub and the approach Texas took to the hydrogen hub, entirely different, you know, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see the outcomes for those sorts of projects. And I can understand why companies would really need to be engaged in the different regions. That seems really important. I want to ask you a couple personal questions. So, I mean, I see how hard you both work and what you do, and I can tell you're passionate about the relationships you're building. I mean, what do the partnerships mean to you personally, like on a personal level?
Yeah, I spent 4 years getting a PhD here, and my wife and I, we always joke around like those were the best 4 years of our lives, which is probably true. We had a lot of fun. I mean, we had a lot of fun, and obviously when you're in grad school, it's really exciting. You're working on research, and you're making great friends, and so that's always sort of remained as like a special place, in my memory. And I personally enjoy engaging with the students. Right, we sponsor a grad student here right now. I love meeting with Jean-Marc and hearing about his research. I love engaging with all the students. And then there's a business aspect to that too, because leading a research organization, my responsibility is obviously to commercialize technology, but the other one that often doesn't get mentioned is I need to make sure that we have the people and the capability to do that research now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Mm-hmm. And so the way you do that is to stay engaged at the training grounds for those researchers, which are the universities. Mm-hmm. And so I have a business and a personal sort of slant there, but it's a ton of fun. I mean, in the end, it's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
And I'll add, even though I don't have a UT degree yet, it's still possible.
It's not too late.
Not too late. I think it's in the end, I'll give you one example to show why it is so important and so enjoyable to work with UT as well. And the example is, some of you may know, a place called Process Science and Technology Center in Pico Research Campus. Mm-hmm. It's a pilot facility. We have been working with them forever, many decades. We, in the past, will work a lot with them, almost as an extension of Shell technology to test a lot of the biofuel technology. And now, with energy transition, they want to test a lot of the power technology as well. How do you electrify? How do you test, different ways, integrating renewables without the grid, power electronics and all that, which is extremely important and also fascinating. But then there's a layer behind that as well, which is the human aspect, which is really giving me the most joy. I'll tell you some of the people, through those collaborations. One of the early pioneers of PSTC is a gentleman by the name of Jose Bravo. He really created this model of university-industry collaboration, and later he joined Shell as a chief scientist, one of the top honors as a technical person, and he made a huge impact in Shell. And recently we have a graduate from PSTC again, Lina Roida. She joined Shell in Houston. She moved to Brazil with Deepwater, and now she's managing our research and technology center in Qatar, in Doha. So we just have those, not just technology, but also people interacting with this kind of a legacy that's make it very, very enjoyable.
Yeah, and I mean, as the Jim Fair Process Science and Technology Center was created in early 1980s, I think, and is a real gem here for doing scale up, and Gary Rochelle has utilized it to develop their amine scrubbing technology for carbon capture and that sort of thing. I think from my perspective, some of the power of the partnerships, or the fact that the university can't do things like that without industry partnerships. It's just impossible to do. And I think industry can create it. You can create a pilot scale plant, but you're losing flexibility, you're losing sometimes open-mindedness, that the university comes with. And I think that's part of the power of these partnerships. I want to change topics, but I actually do want to ask you this question. So what do you think is your biggest accomplishment so far in your role, each of you? One biggest accomplishment so far.
Look, I think I'm not going to talk about personal accomplishments because I don't do any research.
Well, in the partnership.
What I'm most proud of in this role is the success that we've had in commercializing technology. And if I look, in the past, 2 years, we just built a direct air capture pilot unit last month and started it up in Baytown. We started up 2 commercial plants in Baytown last year, both deploying new technology that came out of the research organization, some of it the work being done at universities. And so that's what I'm most proud of in this role of seeing the research organization and the portfolio starting to deliver that pipeline, right? It's really satisfying.
Yeah.
And all of those commercializations, I mean, like Haibin, our stats are very similar to Haibin's at Shell's. At any given year, we have probably between 80 and 100 research programs going on at universities around the world. And so when we deploy technology, it's very common for that technology to have some work that was done at a university.
Yeah, interesting. How about you, Haibin?
Yeah. For me, I think it's my team was really able to support the program between Shell and universities, and then we now have a culture where we measure, how we engage with the university by, the frequency, the effectiveness, and that's really the number one secret. We discovered the only way to be successful in commercializing, scaling up those technologies is if we have regular engagement at all levels. And the other aspect, I think the most satisfying accomplishment to me is really supporting students. Mm-hmm. So there are programs in UT we support. There's one time there's a student coming from South Texas, and she was sharing in a Shell meeting that before the engagement that UT was having, that Shell sponsored in her town, she was like, "Oh, Austin is such a big city. I'm not sure if I want to go there for a study." Mm-hmm. But afterwards, she opened her eyes, and she was, coming to Austin and enrolling in UT, and very successful student. So every time I hear those stories, it's really, I feel like a huge accomplishment we have.
Yeah. Well, I definitely don't underestimate the importance of your mentorship, your support, that you can provide for students. And students are always looking for someone other than a professor to show them their career path, right? So you have tremendous impact every time you engage with a student. I want to ask you, how do you know if these partnerships are effective? And some of my thoughts about this are energy topics politically can be polarizing. Energy is fundamentally important to people's lives. It taps into water, food, quality of life, economic prosperity. And I think it makes sense that people have very deep feelings about energy, the energy industry, where it's going, environmental impacts. And so we see at some different universities are taking different approaches to how to address the concerns of the student body, the alumni, et cetera. And some universities are going so far as divesting from companies in the oil and gas industry, refusing to take funding for research. There's a high level of distrust in certain instances. So I guess a lot of people really want to know the answer to the question I'm going to ask you. What does a company like Shell or ExxonMobil really want out of a partnership with a university? Like, what do you really want? We've talked about it a little bit, but in the context of what's happening sort of globally at different institutions, what are you really trying to accomplish?
Let me start by telling a historical story, because I think it really well illustrates the power of different organizations working together, and specifically academic and industrial organizations. So if you go back, almost 100 years now, the world was in another global crisis, World War II, right? So 80 years ago. And Germany had taken over most of Western Europe. England was fighting for its survival in the air war over Europe. Some researchers at Exxon developed fluid catalytic cracking at that time. And they did it with a collaboration of researchers at MIT, and ultimately commercialized it, scaled it up, and in very short order put FCCs all over the place, and then developed 100-octane fuel for the Rolls-Royce engines in the Spitfires, right? Which is largely credited with as a big part of winning the air war over Europe because they could outperform the Messerschmitts, right? And so it's a really good example from a huge global challenge almost 100 years ago of industry, academia, and government working together to do new technology, scale it, put it on the ground fast, and solve a big problem, right? And so I start with that because while World War II is very different than the energy transition, a lot of similarities. Big, huge, massive challenge, right? We have to abate 30 gigatons a year of CO2 emissions. It's time boxed. You know, depending on whose scenario you look at, the world's already, you know, emitted probably half of its budget. And you have to do it economically because solutions, if society won't implement them, are sort of a waste of time, right? And so no organization has a monopoly on good ideas. And so in a challenge like that, my personal view is that we do a disservice to the world if you start saying, we're not gonna pay attention to this, and this goes both ways, right? Not just universities not liking oil companies, but you have to listen, you have to be open, because the good ideas are all over the place. And the only way you solve big challenges, especially time box challenges like this, is you have to find the best ideas. Some of them are gonna pan out, most of them probably won't, because it's all new, and you have to get after it. And so I think it's misguided to exclude voices regardless of who we're talking about. And that's kind of the approach that we take. Unfortunately, it is a very politicized topic. So it's the reality that we sort of live in.
Yeah. How about you?
Yes. So this topic is very close to me. I've traveled to many universities, in U.S. and also especially in Western Europe, engaging with students. And clearly, I see a lot of emotions. I was also in quite a lot of those with our senior leaders as well. My starting point, and Shell as well, our starting point is, with those emotions, there are good intentions behind that. I think that has to be the first step, right? I give you one personal example. I have a colleague working in Amsterdam in our Shell Technology office there. And one day, her high school son came home and he said, "Mom, I'm gonna join the climate protest against your company. I just want to check with you, are you okay with it? I don't want you to feel hurt." And then she said, "Totally okay. You are in this age, you should do it. By you doing it, you keep us sharp because we need people to push us as well." So in Shell, we actually have employee groups. We challenge each other. We challenge each other to really contributing to society in solving all those big challenges. So that's kind of a backdrop. And in terms of collaborating with universities, it is extremely important. So I think for Shell as a company that's based on technology, we really need to find those investable technologies that can carry us forward for our company's renewal, but also for helping address all those really huge challenges of society. And to do that, we are not, ourselves is not enough. Universities are not enough. Governments cannot do it alone either. So there has to be efforts together. And the last thing I'll mention is, with those engaging with students, one thing that I always share with them is, don't just look at goals or those, you need to look at what we actually do, right? We published just recently our energy transition strategy report that is actually gonna go to shareholder vote in May, which is outlining all the things we do in providing secure, sustainable, and affordable energy. And just watch what we do. And also we need students and university to provide us with ideas. If you say we're not doing enough, great, bring more ideas because we are very hungry for all those ideas for investable technologies.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I mean, the last research talk, I don't know how many of you saw it, the one on hydrogen in the Permian, and Michael Lewis in England's project, talking about the cost of blue hydrogen, the cost of green hydrogen. You know, the hydrogen shot goal is $1 per kilogram. You know, I through the Hydrogen Hub effort and High Velocity, I get a lot of questions about why are people doing blue hydrogen, so hydrogen from methane. And if you compare their calculations where you can get to 80 cents per kilogram of hydrogen doing it from methane versus $3 even with 45V tax credits with green hydrogen, I mean, you can see how complex everything is. So I think it's there are no simple answers. Just to kind of circle back, how do you define the success of the partnership? So now, given where we are, how companies like ExxonMobil, Shell are partnering with universities, if you had to say, okay, our partnership with UT 2 years from now delivered X, like what would that metric of success be? What should we be aiming for?
Yeah, I mean, what we look at is, are we successful in feeding our portfolio? Right, so we have maintain a portfolio of research. One of the reasons that we're here is to get exposed to new ideas, and those ultimately get translated into research programs. So are we actually feeding our portfolio? And then, you know, longer term, is that portfolio spitting out some of those ideas that were successful in putting, you know, steel on the ground or, you know, new processes, products, et cetera. And so that's a big component of what we look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for us, you know, the many elements of it, right? You know, technology development. Are there technology that we can internalize, work with the university, and then commercialize and scale? Extremely important. We think that we have an advantage by working with the university that we get an early look at all the spin-outs, the startups coming out of the university, compared to the traditional financial VC companies, where we have experts in the company engaging with faculty. So the startups, you know, we know, you know, are they important, and then we need to really invest and support them. I mentioned students already. That's extremely important. And the other thing, to me, very important to measure success is also, are we, you know, friends, but also challenging each other, right? Mm-hmm. I was in a meeting with our CTO last year in Imperial College, and during the dinner, you know, he was talking with the president. Essentially, he said, the time of just hugging, you know, those are extremely important, you know, when we start a project, but that should be very, very short. Very soon after,
just a short hug.
Very, very soon after, we should be challenging each other. You know, we need to be each other's both, you know, honest critiques, and then we improve, we critique, we give constructive suggestions, and improve together.
Yeah, no, it's. You mentioned startup companies. I mean, something that I've always wondered about is we have so many students these days who are interested in starting their own company. Mm-hmm. I've started 2 companies myself. I mean, a lot of founders think of they're doing something disruptive in some way. I mean, how do you see this emphasis on entrepreneurship, startup companies, from your perspective as the incumbent energy industry? I mean, I've seen, you know, different ways of responding, but in terms of the partnerships, what are your thoughts on this?
I think the trend, and it's a trend at most universities, to, you know, encouraging entrepreneurship sort of approaches. I think it's very positive. One is it's, you know, academic institutions have been the sort of the bastion of fundamental research. And I think as students and faculty have started thinking about that more and more, they're starting to take the approach of taking that really important fundamental research and how do we start applying it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's very healthy, right? Mm-hmm. And from our standpoint, you know, similar to what Haibin said, we are actively monitoring the startups and we engage with them. And I'll give you a great example. So about a couple years ago, we purchased a company called Materia, which was a startup out of Caltech. right, from grubs. You won a Nobel Prize for the catalysis, right? And that's one of our latest product lines, which is Proxima. It's a thermoset. The big application for it is wind turbine blades, right? And so that's a great example of, we started working with them collaboratively about 10 years ago, and then ultimately purchased half the company and the second half of it just recently. And so, yeah, that's one way to engage with startups. I mean, we similar to what Haibin described. Scout and then engage them.
Is Shell doing anything different in terms of approach? Or?
Absolutely. I think in Shell we have my team. We look at mostly R&D projects with universities, and I have a sister team called Shell Game Changer. They invest in early stage startups, and then of course we have a Shell Ventures team that's investing in companies that are a bit bigger. And then we have corporate development, of course, as well. Acquisition of a company that really can fit our strategy to scale and deploy technologies. So to me, the energy field is so large. There's abundance of opportunities. There's no one company can do it. And even in Shell, in any of the low carbon new areas, in Shell Technology, we view ourselves as a startup, right? We have to have that mindset that we need to be brave, agile, innovate all the time, and then scale up. So there's just a lot of synergy that we can work with university startups.
Yeah. We have time for a question. Shashwati, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I bet you have a question. Do you have a question you want to ask Haibin or Nick as a third-year PhD student in chemical engineering? And if you don't, you can defer, but I'm going to offer you the chance to ask a question if you'd like.
Yeah, of course I have a question. Yeah, and maybe I'll just ask a question on behalf of the many students who are in the room. So for the students here, whether it's thinking about our research and how to make that more sort of relevant and how it could be scaled, or whether it's thinking about jobs after we graduate, how should we be thinking about the partnership and the support that you give to the Energy Institute?
That's a really good question.
Maybe I'll start. So I was a student, some time ago. I think the universities really offer a lot of opportunities. There's just so much resources in this university. To me, when I think about either university, grad school, or maybe early career, there are three things that's important. The first one, of course, is the effort, right? Everyone here is so smart. You need to have some effort. But then the next one is really the choice you make. What are the areas that the university or the partnership that can offer that you feel, oh, this is my passion as well. So I really want to go into those. And beyond effort and choice, the third element to me, I think is really, really important. More than anything else is just the risk-taking and courage. What I found, in life in general, there's some moments that may be a bit scary, and I say, if I go to that area, does it have a future? Actually, it always depends on the person. If you have the passion, no matter what you do, if you think that's the right area, there's always a future.
Yeah, I think, my personal view is the real value of going to graduate school and getting a PhD is you will become an expert in the area that you're doing research, sort of by definition. But to me, the real value is that grad school changes the way you think and approach problems. And when we're recruiting PhD students, that's generally what we're looking for, is capability. I mean, I worked for Bill Koros when I was here. I was a membrane guy, right? I mean, my whole PhD was in membranes. My first job at ExxonMobil was new product development, making polyol esters as additives for fuel economy and engine oils. There wasn't a membrane within, 500 meters of me, right? I think it's easy when you're in grad school, and I remember thinking that, when I get out, I'm gonna have to go and get a job in membranes. That's not really true. I mean, we do hire graduate students for specific areas and skill sets, but we also hire a lot of graduate students to work in totally different areas than what they did their research in. So, I don't get overly wrapped up in that. I think it's, if you're going to go pursue an academic career, I think it's a different story. You generally want to go into that area. But learn as much as you can in graduate school. It's an awesome opportunity to get exposed. You essentially have no constraints on you other than your advisor. And you can do a lot of things. And you can go and explore. You got 4, 5, or 6 years, however long you're going to be in graduate school to go and explore areas. And you've got generally the time to go and explore an area and fail, and then go and if you were like me, half of the stuff I did didn't work, and start over. And that's all a great learning experience. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, I'm going to add something to your question too. I mean, I spend a lot of time on these partnerships as well, and they mean a lot to me. Part of it is making friends, and Nick and Haibin, I consider you both good friends of mine. But I think that the reason that faculty need to spend time on partnerships is not because we need more money for our research. We can go take that time and submit another NSF grant or DOE grant or whatever. So I think it's creating the ecosystem, like the innovation ecosystem, exposing you as students to mentors who aren't faculty. I love the Energy Ventures course and the Cacti program and all that thing. No one's telling me to spend time on that. The reason that I think it's important is for students to be exposed to what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, so that you meet people who have started companies, you develop a network and all of that, and maybe that's what you choose as your path. But I think for you as students, all of these resources that you have, the partnerships we create with the companies and the startups and the philanthropic organizations, definitely take advantage of those, because that's what in some ways will differentiate you from getting a job over someone else who's just worked in the lab and published their papers and done good work. So anyway, take advantage of these folks. And on that, I see it's time for lunch, and Nick and Haibin will be around, so you can ask them some more deep questions. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer you. And lunch from 11:30 to 12:30, there'll be a poster session. Dive into all that research out there, the carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and hydrogen, and then we'll be back at 12:30. All right, so thank you guys.